Welcome to the Fashion Situation Room, a podcast from the front lines of the fashion industry. I'm your host, Michael Jordan, and these are my two co-hosts.
Hello, I'm Britta Cabanos.
And hey there, I'm Peter McLaughlin.
In this podcast, we offer you real talk about what impacts the fashion industry, particularly through the 4S's: strategy, sustainability, storytelling, and solutions. With our finger on the pulse of the most meaningful business trends, which we'll also bring to life with impactful guests along the way, we aim to provide you with actionable insights that will benefit you. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump in. So we did a bit of research to see what some of the industry observers had to say about 2025. Here we are now, early in the new year 2026. And so we thought, okay, it'd be very timely to take a look back at 2025, the year that was. What were some of the hottest trends? But now also looking at the year that's arrived and in what form those we would expect to see those issues evolve and emerge, and other hot button issues that are on the horizon. Okay, so let's begin with sustainability. Sustainability.
A
It's a
very
topic.
common, very common, very used word over and over again.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say is that this term, as you know, it's a buzzword that's come up over and over again. On the one hand, is it overused? Is it too vague and overused? We'll ask my colleagues what they think about that. But also, of course, entering 2025, there was a certain political influence emanating from Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
He who shall not be named. No, no, we will name him. Of course, President Trump and the Trump administration. And there was a lot of talk about what he was going to do and actually did do on the first day regarding DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there was anxiety that he would do something similar to sustainability and ESG, environmental social governance criteria. And so what the observers are saying is that word of sustainability's death and demise have been greatly exaggerated. Perhaps a better way to describe it is that for sustainability issues, two steps forward, one step back. There's very interesting research out there regarding what global CEOs have to say that 99%, wait, let me quote. This 99% figure comes from an Accenture UN Global Compact survey that 99% of global CEOs still, despite what was happening in Washington, global CEOs around the world still see sustainability as an issue that they were going to continue with their programs aimed at sustainability. Why? We'll explore more of that, why it makes business sense, but it's also what consumers, more and more consumers are demanding. But also at the same time, there was another survey where half of them, let me quote this accurately to where in the same poll, excuse me, same survey, half admitted that they're uncomfortable communicating progress that they're making in sustainability. So keeping their heads down because they don't want to draw attention from anti-sustainability forces out there. Okay, so two steps forward, one step back. So let me ask my colleagues here, Britta, Peter, what do you think? Is sustainability still relevant? Is it dying? Well, how do you see it emerging in or continuing in 2026?
Well, I would say that it's definitely still very relevant because ultimately, if Deloitte is saying that 80% of companies have increased sustainability investments in their company over the last year, I mean, that's just proof because ultimately, sustainability isn't just a nice thing to be pretty and tie on a bow and show that, yes, we vaguely care about the environment. Ultimately, nowadays, for companies, they have no choice but to look at sustainability and incorporate those initiatives into what they do because now it's just purely risk management. Considering like there is so much overconsumption and overproduction that where are they getting these resources from? Because the earth does not have an infinite amount to supply these companies to make their products. So now companies really need to invest in this so to protect what they're doing, what they're making, and how then they're going to be able to produce going forward.
Can you, I'm curious, Peter, can you give an example of such a thing? You said that they have no choice essentially. Can you
Well, for example, like if a company wants to do cotton, if a fashion brand wants to do cotton, or preferably organic cotton, then the amount that is produced in the world today, one company could use that. Like PVH, Zara, whomever, like one company could use all of it, so there is not enough to go around. So whenever you get companies like Patagonia, for example, who are working directly with cotton ensuring their supply chain. So they know exactly where their cotton's coming from. They can show traceability within their product, and they know how much that they will be able to get, and then how much they need to additionally put in their supply chain. So they're just protecting their business by going directly to the farmer.
and and just to follow up, because of course we want to hear from Brita, but I was thinking of that example too. For example, Uzbek cotton farmers, organic cotton farmers in Uzbekistan, where I've been fortunate to visit and report from. That there are growing numbers, strong majorities of consumers say that they care about how fashion impacts people, planet, and animals, right? So if a company is going to say that, oh, and here's how we organically produce our cotton in Uzbekistan, enough of their consumers will want to see facts, will want to see evidence, and not just words, that words are not enough. So then how to prove that you're truly not doing harm to that community, exploiting that community of Uzbek organic cotton farmers, for example, right? To prove that.
Well, the whole thing, Uzbekistan, within their cotton, it goes into tricky territory because there's a lot of child labor that does that. They have gotten into hot water because of, they make all the villages, including people who aren't farmers, whether it's doctors, ch children, whomever, they shut the schools and make them all go out and pick cotton whenever they need to. So that is an element of slave labor. Of course, then there's the Uyghur population in China, which is, Chinese cotton is like a quarter of the entire global cotton supply. So really understanding, therefore, where your product comes from, knowing the traceability of these is where we can trace it back, then really protects and insulates your brand and company from any potential harm that may come uh, from the traceability of knowing where your cotton is.
Reputational risk. Yeah. Brita, what do you think?
Yeah, so sustainability to me in my world has become such a common term almost that it almost doesn't mean anything anymore from a consumer point of view. It's like, oh yeah, sustainable. Everyone says they're sustainable, which leads to greenwashing,
Yeah. Who can
you know.
prove? Who can prove that they're truly sustainable?
Yeah, yeah, my dog is going nuts. Hopefully, it's
We don't
not
hear it.
distracted
We
too
don't hear it.
much. Um, she wants to be in on the conversation. So I was doing a little homework, preparing for this, and what I found really interesting is now there was the term greenwashing, which was stating false claims that your brand is, being green, where they're really just taking advantage of a marketing term and not really having that proven facts to show that they're really doing what they say they're doing. So now it's the opposite. There's this term green hushing that is now the thing. And so it's the opposite effect where companies are nervous. They're nervous to share what they're doing because they feel like they might get accused of doing something wrong or they're not following regulations. There's this, I jotted down some notes that I found really interesting was it's perfection or silence mindset. So they're feeling the articles I was reading were saying if a lot of companies, if they don't feel like they have it 100% perfected, then they're going to be accused of, you know, not doing what they're claiming to do. So you want to have that transparency, yet they're scared, that they're not perfect because all these places are not perfect. It's baby steps, right? They might be making a move in their materials, but maybe they're still, shipping from China to Vietnam to, five different places before it gets to the consumer.
Mhm.
So now it's a different angle to think of is this green hushing, which I think is really sad because I'd rather a company have full transparency and say, hey, okay, we've replaced using cotton from this one location from slave labor. So at least now we're using cotton from a certified, organic, proven
Mhm.
supplier, but
Mhm.
yet, we still have all these other steps that we need to achieve.
Mhm.
So I feel like if companies have that goal, it's going to take years for us to get there. It's like steering the Titanic, but at least start heading that direction. And as a consumer, I would much rather know that they're making the effort and they're being fully transparent than for them to say nothing or something false.
I mean, the only thing with that is it can get very complicated because ultimately, for example, H&M, they did take a stand and they had even on their website because they came out against the forced labor in the Uyghur population. However, then the Chinese government, they took issue with that and then basically told their people to not shop at H&M stores. And so this became, they started really bashing H&M to the point H&M then ended up having to back down and took it off their website. So it's it can get very complicated.
Very complicated. And I think that's what's leading to this green hushing, which is really sad. Let's
Yeah.
celebrate the efforts and the progress we are making, instead of getting reprimanded for, they're taking baby steps, but they're not perfect, but it's still good to know that they're working on something, they're trying. We're all trying our best. And like going back to Michael, your point,
Yeah.
prove, and show us. So if it is H&M, I found a stat that I can pull up where it came from, but H&M was rated, they did a rating on their products, and they were one of the top rated places for achieving some of the goals, which really surprised me because I think of them as just big mass market, but they've got a whole sustainability team and they're making the effort. So I feel like we need to celebrate those small improvements along the way just to, I don't give some hope, I guess.
See, now a guy like me would wonder, well, who produced that survey? Was it H&M PR department that said we were achieving?
No, they
No, no, I'm
no what
joking.
no what Brett is talking about though is true because it comes about transparency and they consistently score very high because they are open and they do reports. But again, it's what we said at the start. It's bringing your critical thinking into it. They do a lot of effort, but it's also because they do a lot of harm. The way that their business model is set up is that their margins are very small, which means they need a lot of volume, which is why they have a lot of stores. And so they need to sell consistently a lot of product to make their profits. But then, of course, that's consuming a lot more, encouraging people to consume more. And then there's a lot of waste at the end because the quality of the product for the price isn't worth reselling. And a lot of the polyester that is used isn't quality polyester to be able to be recycled, which means it all ends up in landfill. So it's just balancing the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I should have pointed out that here's the article that we drew the subject matter from Fortune and focused on the 2025, the year sustainability didn't die. As I said, we always want to show some of our sources, but it's also important to keep in mind all three of us are here in the US, but of course, sustainability isn't only going on here. It's not only an issue here. And so the European Union and others are passing new rules and policies and all that, imposing
They are
sustainability
ahead of us.
standards. That's right. And more Chinese companies will we'll talk about China in a moment. I lived in Beijing for 5 years, and I know that more and more Chinese companies have sustainability along the top of their masthead, their banner on their websites too. So it is becoming much more the norm despite what's happening in the US, any sort of political pressure, that sort of thing.
Mm. And also
I'll,
just to
I'll
say what
go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna like go on top of what you were saying, Britta, about like, sustainability being an overused word, that companies are acknowledging that. The ones who have also done a lot of work, like Nike don't even use it anymore. And what theirs is because it's such a huge umbrella that encompasses so many different things from different tiers within people's businesses, that now Nike do move to zero. So they're focusing on their carbon and to therefore, making it relevant to them with the term move, but it's also like what they're really trying to do is get to carbon neutral.
Well, you know what, and even for our viewers to realize that as we were coming up with the name of this podcast and a little subhead, the description of the podcast, we even debated whether to include sustainability among our S's. Because I thought, as an insider outsider, mostly outside the industry, I thought, well, it's a good umbrella term that people can grasp. But the two of you were saying, well, it's so overused that maybe it means nothing and that it always requires a definition, perhaps. It's too vague, that sort of thing. But I'm curious to ask you guys just one more thing before we move on. How would you explain to younger folks, the younger generation, why does sustainability matter?
I think the younger generation has even a bigger understanding and a bigger grasp and a bigger concern because they're the ones that are the future, right? And so my daughter, for example, is 24 and sustainability is one of her top priorities, and she's getting her master's degree in sustainability, and it's become more and more common. So I feel hope that they're grasping it or striving for it than more than maybe the older generations.
Mm.
Because didn't grow up that way and it wasn't a thing. Even when I was in the industry, we were mass producing like millions of units of things for Walmarts and Targets, and it didn't even occur to me the amount of volume that we were working on. And now it's a whole mindset shift. And I really think the younger generation is going to be way more on top of it than, well, it's not in the prime of, it wasn't even a concern. So
Mhm.
I feel very hopeful that the younger generation they're the ones that are going to have to take this on, right? We're leaving them the mess. So
Well, the only thing, like, I totally agree with you, and I think the younger generation's amazing because, whenever you get your Greta Thunbergs and the people who are really planting a flag in the ground to be like, we can't do this anymore. But at the same time, there is a thing, which is the gap. What people say they do and what they say they believe and what they actually do. And a lot of the times, a lot of the fast fashion of Shein and Temu are being driven by the younger generation. They're the ones that are buying this. And then they go on, YouTube doing their unboxing videos and how many outfits that they can do and
their
look how
hauls.
much you can get. Yes, look how much you can get for $100.
Yeah.
So I think it's again, it comes back to critical thinking about being mindful of it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think we should really have I think this is a great topic for a future, episode, because on top of that, I think a lot of the younger generation aren't really aware that if what they do buy from Shein and Temu really it's very harmful. There's a lot of toxic chemicals in there, and because you buy direct and you're not buying it from a imported store, they don't have to follow any of those rules.
Yeah. And I'm sure we could find some data for you, Michael,
Yes.
that the mindset
Mm.
is there and
Mhm.
the desire is there, but yet, like Peter is saying, where you spend your dollars is really proving
Mhm.
where your values are. You might think it and believe it, but yet you still want that dress for that party,
Mhm.
for $25. So spending those dollars is really, you know, kind of guiding that mentality where, I think they're hoping and they want to strive for that, but yet they're spending their dollars in a different way.
Right, right.
So, yeah,
I think we could go on and on about
that
sustainability.
could
And
be a whole episode. So,
of course, we'll revisit this in the
yeah.
future in
Mhm.
various forms. But
Yeah.
let's move on to our second topic. Speaking of how just to not be so U.S. centric with our view of the fashion industry,
Mhm.
China. And China's role leading the global acceleration in the clean economy. And if you only watched the US, only paid attention to the US, you'd think clean tech was slowing, right? But globally the transition has surged, led by China. And now I know a bit about this because, as I mentioned, I lived in Beijing for 5 years. I work with some Chinese tech companies in media relations. I just returned a few weeks ago from the world's largest tech show in Las Vegas, representing a Chinese laser tech company in media relations. And of the 4,000 companies there showing their products and services, more than 1,000 were Chinese, and many of them focusing on their various forms of clean technology. And plus, it's also important to know that while someone like President Trump is touting the virtues of coal, which
Mhm.
is largely pandering to the coal industry donors and voters in coal producing states, that that of course many other countries and companies are turning away from such a dirty resource.
Mhm.
But vis-a-vis clean tech and fashion and China's role, that China produces anywhere from 30 to 60% of the world's clothing and textiles. As I've learned some of these concrete numbers, they're also producing a significant portion, some 20+% of electric vehicles. And so it's important for us to also keep an eye on China as the world's second largest economy and the engine of the global economy, to pay attention to what is happening in China and how it affects the fashion industry. So, Britta, Peter, anything to say about China and its role today?
Well, yeah, because ultimately the amount, I think the numbers that I'd seen was from 2022, but like China is of all the global carbon emissions, China is the largest contributor with around 30%, and America, the USA is second with around 15%. So if that was 2022 and now China is really like moving towards clean energy because they were focused a lot on coal. And then you have the US that, is stopping trying to do clean energy and is moving backwards into coal and oil, then those numbers will really shift. And what I also find interesting is that the other developing countries like Pakistan, India, and African countries, where a lot of factories and fashion factories are, particularly as the middle class rose in China, a lot of those factories that are based in China, then they opened in, you know, Cambodia and now African countries because they're chasing.
Vietnam too. Yeah.
Yes, because they're chasing cheap labor. So the fact that now those countries are going into solar, they're like skipping over the whole dependence on oil and coal and going straight to solar. So I think America risks being kind of left behind a little bit.
Mhm.
Well, just to interject before we hear from Britta, we hope that that's only lasts as long as this presidential term
Mhm.
lasts, and that America will return to a healthier, cleaner path. Not that it to hold it up on a pedestal, of course, right? But of course, we do see these as retrograde policies dragging us to the past. So Britta, what do you think? Anything to offer
Yeah.
about China?
Well, I'm a fan and I'm always hopeful that we'll bring some manufacturing back to the US. but it's so hard to compete and it's so expensive. So, in my ideal world, we would be producing here and not relying on those countries. But since we do rely on those countries, I'm happy to hear that they're implementing a lot of these, new tools and resources so that it is better for the environment. They're years, light years ahead of us, I think, when we're just falling behind. And so while everything is being so produced in all of those other countries,
Mm.
it's I'm happy that they're able to do that and reduce the environmental footprint. But I'm concerned about, yes, the US just being so far behind. And by the time we do get a new administration, like we're going to have so much catching up to do. And yeah, so it's I don't know. I don't know how we're going to achieve that. It's going to take years
W-
to
w-
get that. And yeah, like you were talking about the coal producing states, for them, it's providing employment, but at the same time, it's just contributing to the pollution and the fossil fuels. And as my daughter would always remind me, we only have so many years. We have 30 years of left of good soil or of this or that, and it's coming up so fast, all of this harm. It's
mm,
within our lifetime,
mm,
Mm.
so, and now we're losing more years because we're just not addressing it.
mm.
Well, not only
So,
that, there is a finite amount of oil in the planet. And ultimately, America, that's the reason they're like running out. And that's why they're going into fracking and then going into Venezuela because Venezuela is an untapped resource. So even regardless, like as this then exacerbates the amount, it'll be interesting how that affects things.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, we don't want to get too political, of course, but
yeah,
back
No, no,
to
no, but it's interesting
Venezuela.
because it's all interconnected. So, for example, the other thing I would also bring up with China, which I find interesting, is that like in January, like big designers are now working there,
Mm,
and whereas beforehand, so it was interesting. Like I had a friend from whenever I was in Milan who worked at Prada, and he was developing this. He was working with these Chinese companies, and instead of made in China, it was made for China. And so instead of China just being the factory that made everyone else's products, they were really trying to be insular and making things for themselves. I even went over because, Western designers have been working there for a while, and I went also to potentially get a job there. And ultimately, I decided against it. But I do have friends from those days who did do that. And so now you're seeing big names like Kim Jones, who was working at Louis Vuitton and Fendi, and Chris Van Ash, who was doing Dior menswear. Like they're now heading these design houses in China. So
mm,
China's no longer this, factory
yeah.
making everyone else's
The
stuff.
world
Yeah.
factory, right?
They're now creating product that they're going to export and literally compete with the luxury brands that are European or American that already exist.
Yeah.
So even how we frame and think of China will eventually have to change because they've moved on.
yeah,
Well, you're
there's a
right. And
big shift. Mm,
speaking of that, that one of the old stereotypes. And I speak as someone who, having lived there and worked with many Chinese, and I was also visiting professor of international journalism in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. So I'm very fond of the Chinese. It's also important to keep in mind that yes, 30, 40 years ago, the Chinese had developed a reputation as the world's factory, producing toys, for example, that you might receive over the holidays that would break after one, two, three usages. That stereotype of poor quality. But in fact, now, as many of you realize, that China is on the cutting edge of all
mm,
forms of technology and AI. China is also the world's largest consumer market, the world's largest exporter, and they're just extremely savvy and sophisticated about how to sell products, as you see with Shein, with Temu, that sort of thing, despite the controversies, right? That some will find those prices and the range of products irresistible. So it is important to understand more about the Chinese, and at some point we'll have a Chinese guest who can help explain. I have a couple colleagues in mind who can shed some light, bring some insights regarding the Chinese market and Chinese plans for the future. Anything else on this,
I,
colleagues?
I think it would be great to have some future guests so we can all get a better understanding of the landscape of it because it's such a big topic and
Mm.
it's a whole shift in the global market. So it'll be
Right.
something we could really dive into a lot deeper, I'm sure.
Because
Indeed.
as you guys alluded to, it's not just what China's doing, but also how the Western world is responding to it, the
Mhm.
fashion industry and all that, right? So China is a real key player in the fashion industry in 2025 and now in 2026 as well. So let's move on to our third topic, which is AI. Everyone's talking about AI, but specifically, they're talking about so many of the pros, so many of the cons.
Mhm.
But let's focus on what it's doing to the fashion industry. I mean, one thing I'm curious about, I find very interesting, is the issue of creativity and how it's infusing fashion design and fashion designers, some of whom come up with brilliant ideas. But as we even discussed at a recent fashion show where we all met a few days ago, that it's not old-fashioned working what on a model or pinning. How do you describe it, Peter, the other day?
Oh, like draping on a mannequin.
Draping.
Draping on a mannequin. Okay, you guys know
Mhm.
the terminology. It's not quite that, but feeding information or creative ideas and allowing AI to take the ball and run with it, I guess, right? So I'm wondering if it should even lead to a new specialized occupation, and not just fashion designer, but AI fashion designer to give credit to,
Mm.
yes, we're using the machinery versus the draping of the mannequin, the old school way of doing it. What do you guys think of that, since this is more specifically how it's affecting your industry?
You want me to jump in first, Peter?
Yeah, you
Please,
you go for it.
a lot
Yeah.
there, not just for
Yeah,
this
we could,
episode,
this
but
could be, this will be future episodes as well, because
yeah.
we could really dive into this. When we were first talking about this as one of our topics, I think we described it as the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
So with AI, there's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly.
Now, let's hear some
So
examples from the front lines.
yeah, yeah. As a designer myself, I love the new tools. It is so much fun to play with. It's so much fun to be able to create that quickly. I went to FIT. We learned draping. We were in the lab for hours, pinning, sewing, stitching, steaming, like all those things, making patterns flat, by hand, every adjustment for the pattern. You make a paper pattern, you cut it out, you try it on, you make fit revisions. You go back, you take your paper pattern, you add a quarter inch here, quarter, like it could go on and on, many iterations. Now you have tools, Browseware and Clo, where you can put it on an avatar. You can build your avatar in the exact measurements you want. If you're doing children's, if you're doing a brand that's for tall people, plus size, whatever you want to call it, you can build that avatar and do all of the patterning digitally. Even the seam placement, you can visualize if you want princess seams or darts or what have you.
Mm,
So the amount of iterations that you're saving and keeping in mind, every iteration is a cost, right?
mm,
Probably being made in China if you're at a big company. So you're shipping things back and forth. You're making samples over and over again, using fabric over and over again. All of those samples that don't fit are garbage. So in the with the point of view of development, it's incredibly sustainable and making a big difference in that waste and time. So I would say that's a really positive thing that you're going to get out of AI. Plus, you could do, if you have a meeting with a buyer, you can come up with a 10 colors to show them through AI generated examples, and they look like real humans, like, right, you can't even hardly tell which one's AI, which one's human. So
mm,
you can potentially show a buyer all the variations of one style without having to actually make every single one, dye the fabric and all those things. So I could go on and on about that, but there's so many positive things that are coming from the tools and the AI that we have that is, people are working in now. Um,
Yeah. Speaking which,
but then you've got the whole opposite side where there's, how do you know it's real? How do you know who's the person behind it? Is there really a designer behind it, or is it all completely AI generated? Is it inclusive? I mean, there's so many questions. So
uh,
yeah, it's really looking at both sides and kind of finding that balance again of how you use it, how you use it properly, how you use it to um, improve your process for less waste and achieving more sustainability. You just have to I think we have to be really careful on what we put out there and
mhm.
being honest about it and transparent and not using it to trick the consumer, but being open about what was created with AI, perhaps. And I don't know, Peter, I could go on and on. What are your thoughts?
I mean,
I'm
the
sorry
way
to interject. I hope I didn't distract you, but there's this article, for example, we were referring to as well. No, the AI models replacing fashion models and business models, right? From Forbes. But go ahead, Peter, please continue.
I mean, just as Britta was saying, I mean, Chloe and because I agree with you. I think that it can save a lot of time and resources and fabric and things like that. That it just means if you have an avatar and you want the collar longer and things like that, it immediately automatically does it on the pattern, then you can print the pattern out. But the way I would see that more is that's like a software tool, whereas I think AI can get I think where companies can use it is to predict maybe where what consumers what are going to buy, which means that then they don't have to overbuy and hopefully then overproduction can be really lessened, which will help a company to therefore not have to pay more, that reduces waste, things like that. I think because there's so much clothes is just sent to landfill that haven't even been worn.
Mm,
So it can definitely, I think, be useful for that. The example that you just showed, Michael,
Yeah.
is like really scary. But and I think companies need to be careful because I understand trying to like save money that, advertising campaigns can be expensive, but like I feel that women in particular who, in any magazine who are held up to models and fashion models and that can feel bad about themselves as it is, and now they're being compared with people that don't even exist. Like, how are you meant to keep up with that? And just as an example then of this, Coca-Cola, for example, got really a lot of criticism and pushback for their Christmas 2025
mm,
campaign because people felt it was soulless and because it was all done by AI. Whereas Apple, they got totally praised for the crafting that they had done. It was all like hand done. Their new marketing thing, their new logo for Apple TV and things like that, that was all done and they released then the visuals of that. So I think it will show that there will be a move towards handmade, crafted, that to show because I was even shocked. I don't know if you saw this, Britta, but there was during the couture shows, one of the couture people, designers, like it was all on AI. Like, so you couldn't actually, the whole point of couture is, the craft, the man-made, the
mm,
hours, the hand-stitched. And then somebody's just doing this. It felt very cheap, lazy, and uncreative.
mm.
Especially like if a designer can't even design something and is asking a computer to do it for them, then what do we need you for? You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah,
then your name is just on the back label. That's it.
right.
Should there be a new title that you are an AI fashion designer, not a fashion designer?
Then I would
It,
take designer out of it.
yeah,
They're not a designer. You can be an,
it's more like a
yeah, you
tech
can,
role.
Ooh,
yeah,
Like,
controversial.
are you figuring out the proper terminology and code to make it do what you're trying to achieve? It's like creating animation.
yeah, because
It's a
then
whole
for those,
different thing.
yeah, because the people who are talented are the ones that make the garment. A person who can just print, like press print on a printer and then hand it to the actual artisans who's going to make it, they're the ones that then have the talent, not the person who press print.
Yeah,
Oof.
yeah.
We got to revisit this issue because this gets Peter
Yeah.
fired up. I like that.
Yeah.
I
And
feel the
I really
passion.
wonder on the education side of things,
Mm,
what are, if I were to be a fashion design student
mm.
today,
Or professor. Yeah.
yeah, what do I need to learn? Am I just going to learn computer skills and not learn draping and pattern making? Is it
Wow.
all going to be how to make AI? Like I don't know what they're, I've been asking a lot of educators that I do work with, what are the students having to learn? Because when they enter the job market, are they going to be expected to know how to use all these tools? And
Wow.
so it's a completely different landscape, and it'll
Yeah,
be
because
interesting to see.
it's the same as fast food. Then there's slow food, like farm to table.
Hmm.
And, there's fast fashion and there will be slow fashion. And I agree with you. Like, I don't know what students will have to learn, but ultimately there will have to be a product there at the end of it for someone to actually wear. Like
Hmm.
you can do whatever you want in your portfolio, but if you don't know how to achieve it, make it, fix it whenever it comes back and it doesn't fit well,
Yeah,
like then, like you're not going to be really maximizing the capabilities of what the job needs or
yeah.
entails.
And then
And
to
there's
produce
great,
this. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's great tools for a fashion designer to use to support their work,
Mm,
but don't lose that craft. Like we can't lose that craft of actually being the creativity behind it, the construction, that should all come from the designer.
mm.
And if it is fully AI created fashion, that to me is a completely different role. But use the tools that support your work and make it more efficient and sustainable. But yeah, there's a separation between the two for sure.
I mean,
Mm.
you
I
you just
wonder if it'll become soulless. The way people work where you know what I mean? Like you can
Yeah.
see like creativity and if as people were criticizing the Coca-Cola campaign, you can kind of tell, I feel.
Yeah. It's almost like your Italian mother that's putting the love behind that meal,
Mm.
versus fast food. It's,
mm,
are they putting the love and the soul into what they're creating, or is it, yeah, AI generated, mass produced, sent out to big box brands, and there's a
what
big
And
difference between the two.
what
it
were you
also,
yeah.
sorry,
Well, I was
I
just going to
was
say what you just said, Britta's goes to the heart of AI itself with the handcrafted
Mhm.
versus asking a machine to do it. It affects so many industries.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, my industry, journalism and storytelling and all that. How many people are now relying on ChatGPT to do the writing for them, to do the research for them, and all that? So many industries are impacted by this, right? But Peter,
And that,
yeah,
yeah, that made me think of another point to all this is I use AI almost daily.
yeah.
It's helped me so much in my work and my research and Perplexity and Chat GPT, and I love Midjourney and some of these other tools. And speaking to my daughter again, who is now studying sustainability,
Mm,
she's yelling at me because of the energy and water usage that it takes to generate the AI responses.
mm,
So that again, like that, when I first started using it, it hadn't even occurred to me, like, how is it generating that? And the amount of water it's using and electricity and all of that is kind of, you don't see that. So you don't even realize. So in a way, you're contributing to more environmental harm, perhaps, by using these big. Oh, but I will throw in, I don't have data. I can't prove this, Michael, but I did go to Tex World a week and a half ago, and there was a panel talk about AI, and I forget the gentleman's name. I'd have to, maybe I can look it up and we could put it in the show notes. But he was saying, because somebody asked that exact question, how much energy are we using for all of these tools? And his response was that in the future, it's all going to be powered by light.
mm.
So he was kind of like, don't worry about it, because in a few years, it's going to be generated, the power is going to come from light.
Ah,
And he wasn't able to expand because it was a short panel, but I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And I did Google it. I think I might have even used perplexity to say, is that going to be true? And it didn't have a solid, firm answer.
Mm.
So we'll have to wait and see again what the future is holds for that, because that's at the moment burning up a ton of resources.
But
Yeah, and so many companies, fashion companies are all jumping on that bandwagon,
Yeah.
to give an experience for their consumer. And if
Mhm.
it is one of those that it's like, okay, again, it could in theory be helpful if it's one of those that a person can try on an outfit and see what it looks like on them before they even purchase it or send for it. Uh,
Mhm.
but like if all of these companies had have jumped on green sustainability initiatives the way they're jumping on AI, because I think it just blows my mind that OpenAI that does ChatGPT doesn't make any money. It's
Mhm.
the same as, and they're looking for, I think, another 40 to $100 billion of investment to try and get
Crazy.
themselves there. I think they make, the last I read, I think they made like $4 billion last year, but ended up spending 5 billion. And I think Microsoft owns 20% of them. So whatever comes in automatically quickly has to go out to pay a lot of their bills. So
Wow.
they're doing that Amazon thing where it's like grow and grow and grow and become, the people can't live without it to the
Yeah.
point that, and then hopefully they'll make money. So there could be a huge, big AI bubble that could burst in the future.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
huh. Well, again, another topic that we could explore in depth because there's so many angles. I mean, like you even said, talking about jobs being lost, that sort of thing with
Yeah.
in the industry and losing skills, losing crafts is really a fascinating topic. I'm happy to hear how your daughter keeps you grounded.
She she
Uh,
does.
she
That
keeps you,
generation.
yeah, she
Yeah.
keeps you tapped into so many
Yeah.
trends.
And
And
everything she tells me, I'm like, really? Wait, I
yeah.
had no idea. And so she's,
And
she's studying this every day. She's some of the
yeah.
best teachers that are in that world.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to hear what she's learning and what they're teaching at,
And 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 let's point out that we each have friends and connections to Parsons School of Design,
Mhm.
Fashion Institute of Technology. At some point, we will invite one of those professors onto the program to ask about what they're teaching, what they see the trends are in fashion design education, and how they're doing what they're doing, what the students are demanding, what they see as the future for their students. That sort of
Yeah.
thing would be
Yeah.
fascinating.
Well, Britta, I also just would commend your daughter because the one of the things because Harvard did a sustainable fashion course and I was the TA for that for a few
Mhm.
years. Having to grade the essays and stuff that were put in, and you could tell which ones were written by ChatGPT
Oh,
as
yep.
opposed to the ones where people researched it. But the thing that I was more concerned of, again, it goes back to critical thinking. Because if people are just going to switch the brain off and believe what ChatGPT tells them, whenever ChatGPT is just scouring the internet and coming back and saying, these are the results I've found,
Right.
whenever so many people have come out and said that ChatGPT hallucinates, that
Yep.
it can have one conclusion from the article, which was not actually written in the article. And if it is scouring all of the internet, well, anyone could write anything. So it's coming back to you saying these as facts whenever no one will go back and look at the where ChatGPT got these
Right.
um, information from to check if it's accurate. So if people are going to switch their brain off and really not check, that's again and lose critical thinking. That's the part that would really concern me going forward.
Yeah, for sure. For
You
sure.
know what? On a personal note, I think that while it's important that we have those checks to identify what's been AI generated or Chat GPT generated, I see there's a need for the flip side, which is to earn a check if I write something from scratch. Okay, like we deserve credit that no AI was used in the creation of this product. It's
Yeah,
getting to that point
like
where we should
non-GMO
assume that
product.
AI.
Yeah.
What's that? What's
Yep.
that? What's that?
Like non-GMO products, food products,
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
get
non-GMO.
that
yeah,
stamp. They should create
Yeah.
a stamp. You get to put it
well,
on your article. This
well,
is
that's, I mean,
human ingredient.
it could create a certain desire, which is I want that stamp. Is I want to
Yeah,
prove that I'm
yeah,
using my hands
yeah,
to create this. I deserve that credit in this day and
yeah.
age.
I
Okay.
feel like that's really sad for writers and journalists
Yes.
because the
Yeah.
years that you put into building a writing career,
Yeah.
and now anyone can just whip up
Yeah.
a novel if you want. You
Or
could just,
graphic designers or whatever.
yeah, there's so
Or
many.
fashion
Of
designers,
Yeah,
course,
like
all
getting
of
a
exactly.
it.
prompt and make me a
All.
dress in this
Yeah,
color. What?
yeah,
There was a Chinese company. I don't need to name the name at this point, but a Chinese company I found at in Las Vegas at the CES, that world's largest tech show, where you can feed a script into the software and they will create a film based on the
yeah,
script. Okay, it's getting
yeah,
to that point. It's not just, hey, can you create a PowerPoint for me? Can you create a
yeah,
thumbnail for my video? But can you create a movie for me based on this
yeah,
information? Okay.
yeah. It's crazy. And
Anyway,
it's happened so fast. I
yeah,
feel like it was overnight.
yeah,
One day my husband was like, "Oh, have you heard of Chat GPT?" And he told me about it, and I was like, "Ah." And then, a week later, I'm playing with it, and I'm like, "This is amazing." It's overnight. It's so fast. So what's it gonna look like in a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Well, be completely different again. So
yes. Well, let's move on to our fourth topic.
yeah, what
Which is
happened to
about,
our 60-minute podcast?
well,
Yeah, no, these are good topics that
we,
deserve
we had a
a lot of
hunch.
attention.
We,
So,
we had a hunch that some of these
yeah, we
might,
would go over.
that we wouldn't have a shortage of things to talk about.
Yeah.
Now we're confronting the reality. For our viewers, once again, this is an experiment. Please be forgiving. We're gonna iron out some of the kinks, and we expect that by episode 2 will be a smooth running operation. Okay, we're
Well,
working.
I'll say this is part of the reason we're doing the podcast is because the three of us started working together, and every time we had a call, we had such good conversations that we just kept thinking, "Oh, we this is where we want to share, we want to bring people into the conversation because like you said, we all come from different points of view and different experiences. So it's just there's so much we can discuss and share. So
Well,
we'll
we
we'll
also know
work.
that many
Yeah.
people are suffering from sleeplessness and insomnia. This is our contribution.
I hope we're not putting people to
Plague.
sleep.
Hopefully.
Maybe just a little nap.
Yep.
Okay.
And
So
dozing off.
our fourth topic, supply chains. Okay. There's the role and reputation of supply chains, which on the one hand were rocked by scandals, on the other hand, by US imposed tariffs over the past year. Okay. And so one of the themes has been the uncertainty and how it's affected supply chains over the past year. So I'm wondering how the two of you see supply chains being affected over the past year and what you anticipate for the year to come.
Well, I mean, it was because of the tariffs, a lot of companies had to very quickly pivot because if China was going to have 25% tariffs, then they would go to Cambodia or Vietnam that maybe only had 10%. And then that left a lot of factories in China or countries that they moved really high and dry
Mhm.
that they didn't, and they're losing a huge chunk of their business. If they had invested into sustainability initiatives and at the behest of these brands, and then they suddenly pull the rug out from under them and saying, yeah, we're going somewhere else. So they have a workforce that they need to pay and all the rest of it. So it wasn't that. Yeah, it was and ultimately all of this gets paid, the consumer pays for it.
Hmm.
Like any additional cost, the company adds it at the top and the consumer pays for it at the end. It is not the companies or the government of that country.
And what would you like to add to that, Britta?
Yeah, it's so confusing, I think, and from what I've heard inside my network is that the makers, the designers, the brands, they don't know what to do because it
Mm,
changes from one week to the next. So they start shifting and moving things around, and then it's like, oh no, wait a second. We'll just put it on pause for, a month, and it's like I don't know how anyone's getting anything done efficiently because it's just, I mean, maybe it's more set now. I don't know the latest, facts on where we stand
Hmm.
with different countries, but it's just, I feel like it's just a mess. Like, how are you
yeah.
supposed to know what to do with your business, with your pricing? Everything's up in the air, every day changing. And there was one brand I heard from at Tex World. It was one of the panelists again, and they produce in Asia. And they were saying, they absolutely are not changing their pricing. So they have kept their prices as they were before, and they're just taking a hit. They're taking a cut. But that was their priority, which I thought was really admirable because I'm sure their profit margin was hugely shrunk, but
Mm,
yet they didn't want to give up their manufacturing. They had years of you build up years of partnerships with these makers.
mm,
Unless you're a brand new company, you've maybe been using that factory 5, 10, 20 years, who knows? And then all of a sudden you're just going to say, sorry, you no longer get our production because we can't afford it. And
mm.
all those people are, cut back on jobs, on employment, on, paychecks for these people that have relied on it for years. And it's just a sad situation. It's a butterfly effect, domino effect,
Yeah.
so
Because every product, like I've been in those meetings where you have the factory that's making it, and then like the production will be arguing over the penny, over the half penny,
yeah.
because if they're ordering like tens of thousands of this product, that will add up. And so you're really talking about pennies and nitpicking. So if they're going to suddenly add 25% tariffs to things, it really does have that domino effect that you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, let me ask you about what role reputational risk plays as a motivator for change.
Mm.
For example, the Italian the scandal with Loro Piana.
Hmm. I mean, listen, that is also huge
How would you
because
summarize it? First of all, for our audience to summarize.
well, because the Loro Piano, whenever it came out, for example, that they had these artisans in Peru in the highlands that do vicuña, which is like this ultimately super soft, softer than cashmere, but it also costs a fortune. And they were being paid nothing. And Loro Piana is then selling these things for thousands of dollars for a sweater. So I think it shifts the foundation of what people believe luxury is, because
Mhm.
you go in believing that luxury isn't fast fashion and that it isn't a Zara or a Shein or a Temu, that you believe like, oh, it's the craft because that's the image that is sold
Mhm.
to you. And then you find out actually there is sweatshops as well. So this was a bigger scandal because there was like 19 brands that now the Italian government is looking into for exploitative labor practices. And you're going from Yves Saint Laurent to Loro Piana to Tod's to there's like Alexander McQueen was even one of them, which those are some of those are owned by LVMH. So it goes to the bigger thing of again people buying into the idea of made in Italy. But then you find out that actually made in Italy doesn't mean say made by Italians.
Mhm.
And I was in Milan around the 2000s whenever everything started being shifting towards China, and even big companies like Armani and Versace and stuff, they were getting things made there um, for their lower labels, the lower brands, and then trying to keep the higher brands like the main lines done in Italy. But then the Italian government, like they had the crisis of like, okay, so what does made in Italy mean? And at the time they came up with the idea as long as three things was done in Italy, you can call it made in Italy. So that means the majority could be made in China and then it comes back and it's like finished off or the label's sewn on or maybe the buttons or things like that.
Hmm.
But one of the things that I find really interesting, and I didn't even know this in living there, is that one of the biggest Chinese communities in the world outside of China is actually in Bologna. So they
Hmm.
have factories there that, again, just because it's made in Italy doesn't mean say it's made by Italians. And so all of these like Chinese workers are working in these factories. They just happen to be in Italy. So if people don't believe in what luxury is, um, it just puts a big question. Then what am I buying? You
Mm.
know, you think you're buying luxury and you think you're buying craft, but if you find out whenever the curtain is pulled back that it's the same sweatshop as, other brands, fast fashion brands are being accused of, then what's really the difference?
You know what? Brito, do you have anything to add to that? Because that's a nice segue to our next topic, but go ahead.
Yeah, I it made me think of a documentary I saw on Brandy Melville,
Mm,
and it was called Brandy Hellville. And that brand was started in Italy. I believe the founder, the co-founders, whatever, are Italian, but it was exactly what you were saying, Peter, is it's made in Italy, but it's still like a Chinese populated factory that they were using, at very cheap prices, cheap materials, and as a customer, you go into the store and all the labels made in Italy, so
mm,
you don't know, and that leads me to another um thing, that it's digital passports. There's the blockchain and the digital passports that are becoming more and more common. I couldn't quote anyone on this, but I believe that in Europe, it's becoming a requirement, or maybe it already is a requirement in some places, where you're following the entire process life cycle of a garment and every step, where it's made, where it's coming from, all of that. So, again, kind of being optimistic about the future, getting digital passports into products. I
Mm.
don't know if it'll be required here. We'll have to wait and see. But having that option for the consumer, if they were to scan a garment, a QR code on a garment, they could see, okay, the cotton came from Peru, it was sewn here, it was stitched here, and then it traveled here.
mm,
So I think I I would be interested in learning that. I'm not sure, we'll have to see what the consumer, if they actually would, scan the QR code and really read the story and the traveling that that garment has gone through to get into their hands.
mm.
But again, a thing coming up in the future that will be really interesting to explore further.
Well, just to go on top of that, yes, it's meant to be required in Europe. I think it's by 2028.
Okay.
And also on top of that, since we're also talking about solutions, the irony here is that because Prada is one of the other Italian companies that are being investigated, and Prada, well, it was started by LVMH, but Prada, LVMH, there's a thing that they kept brought out, which is about blockchain for digital passports called Aura. And
Mm,
and so Richemont is also, that was another partner, and now OTB, which is by Rene Russo, his company,
mm,
they're also now part of the consortium. And so the whole point of that is that it's digital passports. So I find it a little ironic that these companies have the solution that they developed themselves. And it's also a nonprofit, by the way, or as a
mm,
nonprofit, because what they're trying to do, it's trying to be inclusive so that everyone and any brand can then use the technology within it to, so that it can be traceable and you can see where it was made and who made it and things like that. So I find it just a little bit ironic that they're not using their own product.
Mm.
that is interesting. I like hearing that they're nonprofit, though. Then it
Yeah.
speaks to me as their values are in place, and they're not doing this for profit. They're doing it to make it accessible for people. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, moving on from speaking of luxury retail, our fifth topic, our fifth trend was actually pegged to what happened to Saks Global. I want to show you, share the screen to show you this article from Forbes. Saks bankruptcy, which happened just a few weeks ago, rings alarm bells for luxury retail. And And just for those of you unfamiliar, that Saks declared bankruptcy, which they say is related to the purchase of Neiman Marcus, right? That the burden by over 2.5 billion in debt, largely stemming from its 2024 acquisition. And here's a key line here. Why does this matter? Big picture underscores a broader seismic shift in luxury retail, the decline of the multi-brand department store model amid soaring e-commerce and economic pressures. So that's what I wanted to ask my colleagues here is why does this matter? Will this affect other brands, even shopping culture itself? What do you two think?
Um, well, I would
You wanna,
say definitely yes. I mean, what's really interesting is that these multi-brand retailers, like Saks is another one. That means also Neiman Marcus will be going down. It happened to Barney's, and it's even happening on the online retailers. There's Essence, there was Matches, Farfetch. Like a lot of them are really struggling. And the sad part is that the smaller brands, like a lot of the bigger brands use it a lot because Saks, I think Chanel is the one that's owned the most, but there's Gucci and all the rest of it beyond that. But then that was the platform for smaller brands to have be validated for consumers to go and see these small brands. Um, you know, and the annoying thing with Saks is all of these small brands really live hand to mouth. They need the money from the order so that they can pay for and buy the fabrics to make the next order. And so because they weren't getting paid, a lot of them then were struggling. So if they don't have this revenue stream, like it just then puts a lot of pressure on only direct to consumer for, on their website. And there's so much noise on the website. How do they break through? At least a
right.
consumer can go and peruse and have a look in a department store. But if multi-brand department stores are dying, how is any like smaller brand or designer going to break through and reach a larger audience?
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
Interesting.
Yeah. As a student, when I was at FIT, one of my favorite things to do would be to go shop at those stores. Like Henry Bendel's used to be one of my favorites, and Barney's. And you would see the big brands, the big labels, but you would see those designers, emerging brands. I wouldn't know their name, but you could tell from the rolling rack and the merchandise that he had, it was a special brand. It was small batch. It was maybe an independent designer. And that, like you said, it gave them the platform and how exciting as a designer to be in the mix of a store like that. That's what's going to get your name out there. And so that is really sad. And I do like the idea of sort of the mom and pop shop boutique retail space where maybe that will drive business to them. But it's again, it's like a consumer shift, mind shift, I guess, because you got a wedding on Saturday, you need a party dress, cocktail dress. You just go to Amazon or wherever and you can get it overnighted. So shifting that thinking as a consumer, go to your local boutique, find that local designer and go and shop there and you get the experience too. Those big department stores, maybe if you're a um in the luxury market and you can shop and you can get the service at those kind of stores, they bring you dresses to the fitting room, they know your measurements, they know your size.
Mm.
But if you're not in that space, how do you get that experience? And so
Well, that's the thing.
the smaller shops, you can go in and they could start to know you and understand your style and your taste and getting that kind of service and experience, I think I hope it's coming back, and I hope that can support those smaller stores.
Mm.
But yeah, I'll have to wait and see and
Mm.
how that, yeah. Are they going to disappear completely, these big department store platforms?
Mm.
I mean, it's just it seems so weird because it's like there's already these huge monopolies happening within fashion of LVMH or Kering, buying up all of these brands. But if you don't even have the space to grow, like I would say Alexander McQueen was probably the last house that was, able to be
Mm.
built. And even he only really got that far because then like Gucci bought half of it, and so therefore with that cash injection, then they were really able to explore the vision of what he wanted to do with their own stores and um, expand the products and the licensing and things like that. So it's the chicken and the egg, and I worry that it's just going to kill a whole level of creativity. I mean, talking about students coming out, if you wanted to do your own brand rather than go and work for someone else, like where do you start? Like it used to be there was obvious steps. Get into a showroom. The showroom then would show to the buyers. The buyers then will put you in these various stores. But if that isn't an avenue anymore, it's a bit bleak if all that creativity is going to go away, and it's just going to be about commercial selling and what
It's
they believe will sale.
unfortunately, yeah, it's influencers, social media. I hear so much like a designer getting advice that they should build their following first, build up an audience and, get all these followers and then start, which I guess in a sense, you start asking them what they want and what you're going to produce based on their feedback. But yeah, how do you compete with that? And not everyone wants to be on social media to run a design brand or to run a business as a designer.
And that
It
takes
just
so
wouldn't,
social media takes so much time.
it's
Like,
it's a full-time,
yeah.
yeah.
And being a
That
designer takes so much as it is and so much resources that really, if you're devoting your whole time on social media for, people just to be, oh, that's cute, that's not. Or worse is opening yourself to getting ripped off. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
many of these like small up and coming brands also are battling with Amazon or all of these like large companies then just going in and going, oh, that was a good seller, let's copy that.
Mhm.
So it's very difficult. It's a very difficult landscape. And moreover, the thing that I also thought was interesting in that article, Michael, was that they're talking then that there is no aspiration. They're getting rid of the aspirational shopper. If you're getting Chanel that has the exact same bag and they're just going to up the price by $1,000, so now it's 10,000 for a handbag, that uh that's who they're going to then focus on. If there isn't going to be these multi-brand department stores where people could go in and browse, and there's different levels, there's like high end, mid end, you have your different levels of brands, then they're just going to do away with it and then just focus on the top 1% who are luxury customers. And so, where does that leave everyone else?
wow. Wow.
How do you think brands, from a communication perspective, what do you advise either small brands to break through the noise or for these bigger brands to really help communicate?
That's a great question.
Well, it's a great question for a future topic for sure, because as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, this should be a an episode for sure, which is how to build a startup, right? How to break through and to invite someone on who has the experience of having broken through and what their best advice would be. I mean, if we're talking about in the fashion space from a communications perspective, thinking through short-term, long-term objectives, what exactly you're trying to communicate, what's your core message, what's your brand story,
Storytelling.
storytelling, how
Storytelling.
to
Yeah.
build out that content. I mean, researching where your opportunities are, your comparative advantage, your value added, and how to prove that with your words, with supported by evidence, right, from a communication standpoint, and how to bring that to light. So, but maybe at this point we should move on to our sixth topic, our sixth and final
And
topic.
final.
Sixth and final with our
See, we
inaugural.
could go, we could talk for hours and make several
Yeah,
episodes. So we'll have a
And
lot
we
of
have.
good juicy
yes,
content for
yes.
future.
And so our final topic for this episode is the materials that we use, regenerative, especially materials. that we use in fashion. And even we've talked a lot about sustainability, but is regenerative, the term regenerative, is that the new sustainability? Looking at the materials we use from the seed, from the soil, from the farm, that 2025 saw growing investment in regenerative agriculture for fibers, with brands backing farms that improve soil health and long-term material resilience. So looking at is regenerative a new the new sustainability. And here's an article that we looked at specifically just to share with you. If you can see, can you see it fully on your end, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just reading down key drivers of sustainable fashion, here I found this to be a key paragraph here. Fashion businesses must struggle to adapt to the current industry trends by incorporating innovative materials and circular economy solutions that truly embody eco-friendly fashion. On the other hand, if anything is encouraging about the process, it's the percentage of consumers willing to pay for sustainable products, presumably including Britta's daughter, right? But anyway,
Yeah.
um, what do you think about regenerative as a new sustainability in 2026?
Well, it's new terminology, probably for most consumers. So it's almost, is it, just switching over from the term sustainability? Now the new trend word is regenerative. But in my mind, it's that closed loop system. So we could be using sustainable materials, but are we thinking about the entire circularity process and closing the loop? So in my mind, that's seed, what did we call it? Cradle to grave. Starting from the birth of the seed, whether it's a sheep or whatever, wherever the fiber is coming from, to how is it ending its life? Is it going into a landfill, or can it go into the soil and be regenerated into something else?
Hmm.
So my perception of it is thinking in a more complete circle rather than just one or two elements of being a couple sustainable elements
Hmm.
are included, but what about all the other steps and thinking about end of life? And from a creative standpoint,
Hmm.
I would love the challenge of starting with the end in mind,
Hmm.
kind of reverse engineering, right? You think about how is that t-shirt going to end its life, and what can I do to work backwards to make sure all the steps that precede it,
Hmm.
are done properly, that it can have that
Hmm.
regenerative quality at the end. And
Hmm.
Peter, you had mentioned more from a farm and soil point of view, which I also found really interesting because I was thinking of it as kind of this closed loop system that I just described, but it's really about the soil and how that whole process works.
Yeah, because what you're talking is like the circular economy, which is it's true. Like and it is feasible. Like CNA in Europe, they did these $15 t-shirt or 15 euro t-shirt that they offered in multiple colors. And so they started at the back, and it was organic cotton, that it was organic dyes, the thread were organic, the labels in the inside were organic, so that if it is ends up in a landfill, it will do the soil no harm. And they even then have various denim and stuff. It was a success, and they do then now various denim ones. But people like brands should look at the circular economy definitely to see how they can implement it, because it will reduce waste, reduce toxicity, and but the regenerative part, because I know it is a big trend that it's happening also in fashion. Again, like wool is the perfect one, because what you were talking about, because you shear a sheep, the sheep's still alive and it will produce then wool then the following year. But it also then goes into like food, and normally just to give a brief, what regenerative is so that rather than plowing up the soil, you leave the soil where it is. If you have a field, you divide it into four. You put your animals in one quadrant and then move them to the next and the next and then the next, so that by the time you get to the first one, the grass will have grown again. so that then they can eat that. Or if you're doing it for, crops that you're not necessarily tilling the soil, or that you're supplementing it with a different crop in between so that that will give nutrients to the soil, so that it's always about soil health. Because actually, whenever you till the soil, you're actually releasing a lot of carbon. So it's an interesting topic, and I love the fact that it's also coming into the fashion world.
You also mentioned, by the way, that you went showing this photo. You sent me this
Oh
photo
yeah.
of an event you went to regarding all these regenerative products or regenerative
Yes,
meat.
these are all regenerative products from. I went to this event, and that also, it, as I said, it did talk about fashion because the representative from Eileen Fisher and stuff was there. But these were then examples of all products that they use, which is regenerative grown greens. They make wine, but it is definitely better for the soil, for the environment, and ultimately longevity for the product.
Well, this is definitely a topic we should explore in the future as well with someone on the ground, on the front lines of regenerative fashion and farming, that sort of thing. Any final words about that?
There's so much to dive into
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
space.
And,
So,
as we wrap up this maiden voyage, our first episode, I feel very fortunate to have a ringside seats next to you two as experts. And just to mention to our viewers again, we're trying to provide some evidence and to support anything that we say, but keep in mind that all these claims that you hear from companies, even from us, you should always do your homework and try to confirm these things from credible, reliable
mhm.
sources as well. To quote your own reliable sources, and hopefully they present their information transparently and verifiably.
Yeah. Anything we
Anything else?
refer to, we could put in the show notes too. We can put the links to the articles that you pulled up, Michael, and
Shall.
have those references available.
And we shall. Those will be my final words. But anything from either of you that you'd like to add?
Yes, well, for us, I think ultimately what we're asking then of the listener, we're going to end each episode with the call to action. And so we can go through each one and then just see what we would like, whether it's just to bring some attention to some things that we talked about, or just to inform the listener of things that they could do to sort of help things move forward. So
Hmm.
Britta, what would your call to action be?
My call to action today, I think it would go back to what Michael is saying is do your research. You know, even if you're a shopper and you're looking for an outfit for your next event, do your homework and just consider where it's coming from. Think twice about how you're spending your dollars. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. It's so easy to run into Target to get some milk and walk out with three t-shirts in my hand because they're 9.99. So I'm constantly having to remind myself, okay, do I really need that? Do I really need another t-shirt, another tank top, or can I live without it? And just slow down, think about it as a slower pace, less consumerism. What do I really need? Where do I want to spend my dollars? So just giving it that thought before you go out there and throw those three t-shirts in your shopping basket.
Just to follow up on what Britta said, following up on my call to action, which is yes to as I learned in journalism school, if your mother tells you that she loves you, check it out. Okay? Confirm it. But the onus shouldn't be on us alone that we need to confirm these things, but also even to put pressure on the manufacturers, on the
Yeah.
producers, like I did with Britta the very first time I met her, which is prove it. Okay, it shouldn't just be like I need to collect the evidence, but that anyone making a claim in our lives, but
Yeah.
especially from the fashion industry, should back up their words with the evidence to persuade us as a smart enough but skeptical audience. So, Peter, anything you'd like to add?
Oh yeah, I would just like to echo what Britta said. I mean, I think Vivian Westwood said it best whenever she was like saying, buy better, buy less, and look after it.
Yeah.
So rather than buying a ton of stuff, like save up and buy something better that will last longer and then look after it whenever you have it.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah. Well,
And
I'm super excited about all our future episodes too, because between the three of us and our network and our, years of experience, I think we'll have some really exciting guests that we can bring in. We're going to talk about not just sustainability, but we'll get designers on here. We can get educators, people from all different aspects of the industry to get all those different perspectives and points of view. And so I'm really excited to dive into future episodes and the guests that we can bring on, and we won't be covering 6 topics necessarily in every single one, but we'll have some focus on, based on the guests that we bring in, and so I'm really looking forward to having those conversations.
great.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I'm sorry, Peter, you want to add something? No.
No, I was just saying exactly. I think each episode will just be around like a topic or two, with people bringing their expertise that we can dive into. So
Deep
it
dive.
won't necessarily
Deep
be
dive.
this long,
That's
but
right.
where we have more of the chance to explore and investigate and again come up with solutions to how, what other people are doing, what other companies are doing, and the things that how people can make better decisions in going forward.
This was an exception because we covered 6 different topics and we introduced ourselves. But absolutely moving forward, I like the idea of focusing on one, diving in deeply so that there's real value in each episode. Okay, with, as we said, with a guest from the front lines to illuminate the on the ground reality. Okay, so thank you all for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please subscribe. Give us a like,
Thumbs
follow
up,
us on socials.
leave comments.
That's right.
Yes,
And
let us know what you would like us to talk about next.
Yeah. Or maybe if you want to be a guest as well, maybe you're in the industry and you have
Mhm.
years of experience, or maybe just starting and have something to share. Let us know.
Great, great. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you at episode number 2.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.
Sure. Bye-bye. That's it for today's episode of The Fashion Situation Room.
Thanks for spending time with us on the front lines of fashion.
If you found value in this conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps us bring more meaningful voices to the table.
And what call to action did you take? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.